Okay. All right.
Steve, I can put it in the chat every once in a while.
That would be great, Catherine. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Great. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our first of four sessions this evening, um, looking at the development of the sacred dimension of eating within Jewish tradition. And I want to start with the blessing over Torah study because this is definitely, I think, falls into that category. So feel free to join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. Okay, so we are going to be, over the course of these four sessions, we're going to be doing a classically Reconstructionist look at a Jewish ritual. We're going to move through many different layers of Jewish civilization, beginning with the biblical layer, and then continuing into the rabbinic period with Talmudic and Midrashic additions, and then into the medieval period with the Kabbalists and the philosophers. I think maybe we'll throw in a few Hasidic commentaries as we move closer into the modern period, and then finally we will get to our contemporary period, the past half century or so, and we'll see how understandings of various parts of this approach have developed over time. And so I hope that will be both interesting and potentially also thought-provoking and inspiring as we think about our own individual approaches to, to what extent do we experience the act of eating as sacred at particular moments or in general. And so we are going to, and you'll see, as we look at the biblical text tonight, you're going to see that there are the beginnings of many of the traditions that are going to be more recognizable, that are connected with the ways those traditions have developed in our Jewish context. Most of those, although not all of them, are part of the system of kashrut, of kosher, but there's definitely more to this whole approach than just the issue of what is kosher and what is not, as we'll see. So I want to start with just a brief reading from Rabbi David Teutsch, who is his very prolific author and editor within the Reconstructionist movement. Some of you may be familiar with this A Guide to Jewish Practice. It's 3 volumes. It was published, I think they came out not all at the same time. I think by about 10 years ago, all 3 of them had been published. This one is volume 1, Everyday Living, and it has a section on kashrut and sacred eating. And so here is his kind of introduction to that section of the book. The act of eating involves us at many levels. Most basically, of course, our lives depend upon the sustenance we derive from the food we eat. Food preparation, meals, and snacking occupy a significant amount of our time and consciousness. No matter how hard we work to grow or purchase food and then to prepare it, we are still beneficiaries of nature and of the actions of others. Eating becomes a spiritual act when it is accompanied by gratitude for the bounty from which we derive nourishment and pleasure. Eating with others creates an interpersonal connection that at its best is an intimate fellowship. If the food tastes good, eating gives us physical pleasure. Food is one of life's great blessings. So this is, I don't know that it can get much more, in one sense, mundane than talking about the experience of eating. It's something that all of us have been doing in one way or another from the moment we entered the world. And so it's something, we are very much used to, and yet there is this invitation, as Rabbi Teutsch articulated, to work towards experiencing the act of eating in a deeper, more meaningful way than simply satisfying our hunger, which is not a terrible thing to do either, but it's just one dimension of the experience. So we're gonna turn to our study sheet. For people who have just arrived, there is a link, or will be a link in the chat. Thanks for putting it on Google Drive, Catherine. I didn't know how to do that. That's much better. We're gonna walk through a series of texts. They're all biblical from various, and actually most of them, I think all of them actually, are from the Torah. So they're all from the first part of the Hebrew Bible, and each one is kind of a window of some kind into a biblical sense of what is special, or what can be special about the experience of eating and what we should be focusing on. So, as we often do, I'm going to invite participants who are willing to take turns reading texts, and I would invite you, if you are willing to do that, if you would electronically raise your hand so that I can see who's willing, and I can invite people to read. Okay. Thank you, Julia. All right. Thank you, Kevin. All right, cool. Okay. Julia, you are going to do the first text then from Genesis chapter 1.
Hear me?
Say again.
Here.
It's so interesting. I can't quite, it's a little bit, I don't even know what the right adjective to describe it is, but it's not
Better?
clear.
Okay.
Say again.
This any better?
Yes, it is better. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
definitely better. Yep.
All right. Okay. So Genesis 1:27-31. And God created the human in the divine image, creating it in the image of God, creating the male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth. God said, see, I give you every seed-bearing plant that is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food. And to all the animals on land, to all the birds of the sky, and to everything that creeps on earth, in which there is the breath of life, I give all the green plants for food. And it was so. And God saw all that had been made, and found it very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Okay, so this text, I imagine, is familiar to many of us, but I don't know that we've looked at it in this particular context of how it approaches the process of eating, and there are lots of interesting things about this paragraph, but I'd like to invite people. So I'll just ask what stands out, or what do you notice about the reference to eating in this paragraph? And you can just if you want to just unmute it, because I can't tell if people's hands are up for reading or for wanting to comment. So just if you want to comment, just unmute. And you don't have to comment either. There's no pressure to comment. And I know we're like,
they don't talk about anything under the water that you can eat.
That's true.
And then it says all things, but then later it comes back to no, not all things. You know, there are some exceptions.
So can you, Maxine,
No, it's
point
all
to the
vegan.
sentence you're looking at?
I'm giving you these things and to all the animals on land, to all the birds. Well, then later you can't. I mean, are they saying we have access to eat these things?
Okay. All right.
All
Great.
the animals on the land, but not ones that don't have cleaved hooves and.
So, you know what? I have never noticed that water creatures are not included in this sentence, which is interesting. But the thrust of this verse is almost the opposite of what you were asking about, Maxine. It's so, and again, I want to just say, so people are aware, and you know what, and Kevin, you can jump in. I just want to say, from my perspective, all these biblical texts, I do not assume they are historical in the normal sense of the term. I read them first and foremost on a metaphorical level. So I just want to share that's my bias. So I do not think we're reading any kind of, actual quotation from the creator of the universe here. But it does convey a certain kind of understanding of how the universe works. So, Kevin, what do you see?
I see vegan. It doesn't say that you can eat the birds or anything that creeps on earth. It just says I give all the green plants for food. So it's saying all the animals and everything else that creeps is going to survive on plants. Everybody just eats plants and fruit.
Correct. Right. Great, Kevin. So right. So human beings and almost all the other animals. We don't know about the fish because Maxine pointed out they're not listed here. But all the land and animals and the flying animals are meant in this point in the mythic awareness of Jewish history to be completely vegan, as Kevin said. There's no eggs, there's no cheese. It's all plant based, and all the animals, we all have the same diet. It's no different from humans to all the other animals, including what we now know as carnivores. The implication of this text is that there's an imagining on the part of the Torah that in some way carnivores, that is not an essential aspect of a tiger or a lion, for example, or a wolf. And so I want to say two other things about this text. Many Jewish commentators, based on this text, say that, well, they say vegetarianism, but I think they really mean veganism, is the ideal in Jewish tradition. This is how the Torah describes human beings eating before the exile from the Garden of Eden, and so it's seen as, this is really how we should be eating, and in some at some point in the future, maybe we'll get back to eating like this. These traditional commentators have made that argument. The other thing just to know, I find this kind of interesting. Seventh-day Adventists, this is their menu guide, chapter 1 of Genesis. A traditional Seventh-day Adventist will only eat what chapter 1 says is okay to eat, what they understand, and some of them tend to read it more literally, was eaten by Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So, just wanted to share that. Okay, and just out of curiosity, was this new for anybody, or is this pretty much this is old hat, the veganism of Genesis? Okay, of Genesis 1 at least. Okay. We are going to move a little bit further down into the story of... Oh, Sue, go ahead. Oh, unmute. Go ahead. Just unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Linking this to the other study groups that's going on to children's spirituality.
Great.
So, what do we have? What is the first thing a child experiences? Is born and is fed. And the sustenance and the continuation of that life is eating and being fed. Okay.
Great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. The next two texts from Genesis 6 and Genesis 7 are a little bit tangential to our conversation this evening. I'm just going to tell you why they both describe Noah bringing animals onto the ark so that they can survive the flood. These two texts, again, this is kind of just, we're bracketing, it's parenthetical, but these two texts are one of the key examples for people who study the documentary hypothesis, the belief that the Torah is made up of several different documents that were woven together later on, because both of these texts, 6 and 7, describe the animals going onto the boat, but there's a crucial difference between the two texts. And in Genesis 6, there are 2 of each animal, that's the version of the story most of us learn, right? 2 by 2, the animals went into the ark, 1 male, 1 female. But in Genesis 7, it says, of pure animals, you take 7 pairs, 14 of each pure animal, and 2 of the rest. So the reason I put this in is just to notice that this early in the Torah, there's this concept of pure and impure animals. Now, there's no definition of what it is at this point, but it's kind of fascinating, and we're gonna circle back to that a little bit later when we get to, the Israelite use of those categories and what was permitted and forbidden. But that was the only reason I put those in, especially Genesis 7, because there is this reference to pure and impure, and it's kind of strange, but it's there. Any other comments about this before we move to Genesis 9? Okay, Catherine, would you read that text for us?
Can I just say something before we do that?
Sure, yeah.
It seems to me that God is saying, I will save the unpure animals, but not the unpure people. I'm going to destroy all of them.
Oh, wow. Well, that's interesting. Okay. That's good. I just want to, we would have to do a deeper dive into the adjective of what's being translated here as impure, which is, I think it's tameh, is the Hebrew word. And it doesn't mean bad. And I think we're not going to see it here, but the reason that God brings the flood is because God says that all of humanity and all of the animals too have really turned evil. So I think those are different categories. I just wanted, but still, it is. I hear what you're saying about it is striking a little bit that there is an effort to save the whole, across the board, and with humans, there's only one family that gets saved. Thank you. All right, Catherine, go ahead.
God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, "Be fertile and increase and fill the earth. The fear and the dread of you shall be upon all the beasts of the earth and upon all the birds of the sky, everything with which the earth is astir, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every creature that lives shall be yours to eat. As with the green grasses, I give you all these. You must not, however, eat flesh with its lifeblood in it."
Thank you, Catherine. Okay. This is one of the first things that God says at the end of the flood. The flood has happened, and Noah and his family have emerged from the ark, and this is really one of the first things God says to them. And of course, there's one major change from what happened before, the boundaries of eating before, and the new boundaries that God sets up at this point, post-flood. So, yeah, Kevin?
What did the people eat after the Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden up until Noah? They must have eaten other things, but the Torah doesn't say.
You mean other things besides plants?
Plants.
It doesn't go into it in much depth. It does when after Adam and Eve, eat the forbidden fruit and gain the knowledge from the tree of good and evil. One of the consequences of that, so obviously they have to leave the Garden of Eden where all of the plants seem to grow almost of their own accord. And once they leave the garden, one of the things God says to them is, now you're going to have to struggle to plant and raise crops. That wasn't something that they had to do in Eden. So that is the transition as far as I understand it, post-Eden but pre-flood. It's still a plant-based diet, but now it requires much more effort to get those plants to grow. Thanks for that question. All right. So what is the big change after the flood according to this text? In Genesis 9, one major difference.
The pendulum seems to swing all the way to the other side, whereas the early part of Genesis said animals can only eat plants and humans can only eat plants. And now humans can eat all living creatures.
Yes.
And you got to get the blood out of the beef, but you got to get the blood out of the pork too, because there's only a restriction on how you prepare it, and no restriction on which animals you can eat.
Absolutely right. So this is like the whole universe of kosher laws. This is the first one that gets given and then gets translated. So what relatively modern practice in terms of kashrut would you trace back to this biblical injunction to not eat the blood?
The salting
and soaking meat, right?
Yeah.
That all goes back to this line in Genesis 9 that says, "You shall not eat the blood of any creature that you eat." By the way, the rabbis, and we'll talk about this, but I'll just point it out because we're here right now. The rabbis have a concept that, the Jews have 613 commandments, but they also said non-Jews had commandments, not nearly as many, just 7 of them. And I didn't confirm. I'm pretty sure one of the 7 would be the consumption of blood, and it would make sense because this law, this commandment, was given to humanity very long before there were any Israelites on the scene. So Jews have always understood this law as applying to all humanity. It's also interesting, there's nothing about carnivorous animals here. You would expect that there might have been, something about them too, but it's all about the change in the human diet.
Is
Yeah.
is lifeblood ever seen as a metaphor for, like, it's no longer living, as in it's not the actual, it's just the existence, the spark of life is now gone, or is it always just purely seen as you must drain the whole thing?
No, I think you're. I think it does. It is saying that in the biblical perspective, the blood is the substance that contained the spirit of the animal, and so you couldn't.
Okay.
It wasn't okay to consume the blood because that was, that was a transgression in a way, that eating the flesh of the animal once the blood was, poured out or somehow gotten rid of, was not nearly the same problem. There are cultures I am aware of where in hunting, the consumption of the blood of an animal that is, successfully hunted is a big deal. It's like a spiritual thing to in some more traditional cultures, to consume the blood of an animal when you have killed it in a hunt. So
Well, when we were
yeah,
in Africa, when we were just in Africa, they didn't even, I mean, that was one of their 3 main food groups, was blood. And they would let the animals, they didn't kill them. They would just, so I don't know. I just think it's interesting that it says like lifeblood, because once it's not alive, I don't know how can it even have a lifeblood?
right. It's just, it came from this belief that that was what animated the animal, was the blood. And which, even I understand why that doesn't make sense, because the animal's dead, but it still has blood in it. But it's like, and I can't
And people
explain
bleed
it, but
and don't die.
it's that is that was the belief, and there was a very strong prohibition on the consumption of blood. Okay, and that gets us to salting and soaking much later on, but we're not there. We're not there yet. I think in the ancient world, they would simply pour the blood of the dead animal out on the ground as much as they could. Okay. Now we're going to go into a different realm of how food is used. And let's see. Kevin, you haven't read yet, right? Okay.
Genesis 14:16-20, he brought back all the possessions. He also brought back his kinsman, Lot, and his possessions, and the women and the rest of the people. When he returned from defeating Kedor, Laomer, and the kings with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king. And King Melchizedek of Salem brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High. He blessed him, saying, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and Blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your foes into your hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything.
Thank you, Kevin. So I apologize. I should have framed this before Kevin started reading. This is a kind of obscure story in Genesis where, so Abraham has this nephew, Lot, that he had brought with him when he moved from Haran to Canaan, and eventually he and Lot are, there's some tension between them and between their respective shepherds, and so Lot goes to live actually in the city or cities of Sodom and Amorah, Sodom and Gomorrah, because it's a very fertile area, and Abraham goes elsewhere. And at some point, there's a consortium of kings, of 5 kings that come along, and they attack Sodom and Amorah, and they capture Abraham's nephew Lot, and they take him back as a prisoner. And then Abraham gathers up this little feisty army and goes after this huge military group of 5 kings and their armies, and he defeats them, and he rescues his nephew. And so this scene is happening as he's returning from his successful military victory with, his nephew in tow. And so the king of Sodom, what does he do? What's the first thing that happens? And I love this, right? He brings out bread and wine. How common is that combination of food and drink when there is some kind of a sacred ritual going on? In Judaism and in Christianity, for sure. I know in Islam, there's no alcohol officially, so I guess I don't know if they do a substitute with grape juice or whatever. But so food is involved, not just any food, but particular food is involved in the celebration of a victory, of something that is maybe even unexpected, maybe even miraculous. And food is a part of that. And this person, Melchizedek, who's both the king of, here it says, right, Salem, it's in Hebrew it's Shalem, and many commentators believe this is the old name for Yerushalayim, for the city of Jerusalem. So in a pre-Davidic time. And so this guy is the king and the high priest. He combines those 2 roles, and it's like the most natural thing for him to bring out bread and wine as this moment of giving thanks. So that's a part of the tradition of sacred eating, is that we use food at moments of heightened awareness of various kinds, and it's part of our celebration. It's part of our gratitude.
Interesting. Bread and wine is what they serve in Catholic, for
the communion.
It's communion. And it's Friday night Kiddush, right? It's certainly in our in Judaism and Christianity, bread and wine, that is, those are 2 of the most basic religious items. And here it is in chapter 14 of the book of Genesis, playing a very similar role. Being brought about by a non-Jewish priest king, which also I think is very interesting. So I just thought that was worth us looking at. Any other questions or comments about this text before we move on to the next one? Okay. If you think of something later on and you're like, hey, I forgot I wanted to ask this question, just let us know. We can circle back. Okay, we're on Genesis 18. This is the scene where Abraham is recovering from his circumcision, and these three visitors that are understood by the tradition as three angelic visitors come to visit him and Sarah out in their tent in the wilderness. And this text talks about how he responds to the arrival of these visitors. Anyone who would like to read, anyone willing to read this chapter 18 who hasn't read, or if you have read, that's okay. You can read more than once. That's okay. All right. Okay, Kevin, go ahead. Thank you.
Just have to unmute, that's all.
Yeah.
Looking up, he saw three figures standing near him. Perceiving this, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and bowing to the ground, he said, "My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought, bathe your feet, and recline under the tree. And let me fetch a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourself. Then go on, seeing that you have come your servant's way." They replied, "Do as you have said."
And it continues on the top of the next page.
Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 seahs of choice flour, knead and make cakes." Then Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, and gave it to a servant boy who hastened to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them, and he waited on them under the tree as they ate.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay. So this is a very different context for the way that food is utilized in, this is not a mundane situation, right? This is, 3 unexpected visitors showing up at Abraham and Sarah's tent. There is something really, I know some of you are aware of, there's a really strange detail in this description if you're familiar at all with traditional categories of kashrut. Anyone want to say what that is?
Whoops.
Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
They're mixing meat and milk and cook the calf in the mother's or in the milk. Yeah.
So they're certainly eating meat and milk together, and it doesn't seem to bother Abraham one bit that he's doing that. And so that's just an interesting thing that the Torah did not see the need to edit to edit this story out, even though it flies in the face of later biblical law and rabbinic law.
Does that mean that the laws of kashrut weren't set yet?
That is one way that people kind of explain it. Like, the laws haven't been given yet, and so Abraham, isn't obligated and doesn't even know. But there are traditions among the rabbis that even though the laws have not been officially given, that Abraham intuited all of the laws that were going to be given later on, and he lived by them, even though they had not been given. They wouldn't be given for a very long time to Moses and the Israelites at Mount Sinai. And people who take that perspective have to come up with a whole different way of explaining this away, because in that case Abraham knew about milk and meat separation and he didn't worry about it. Now maybe you could say, well, the guests weren't Israelites and so he didn't have to worry, it wasn't a problem because it's only Israelites that have to keep them separate. But anyway, that's interesting. But in terms of our conversation tonight and the sacredness, the welcoming of people into one's, personal space. and the important role that food plays in that gesture. And, it is the first, it's what, well, first is bathing their feet, and then let me get you some bread. It's like this was the quintessential way to bestow kindness on strangers who happen by one's one's place of residence in the wilderness. So that's another dimension, another category, I think, of sacredness, is the way that we use food to strengthen people, to nourish people that are, in some kind of experiencing some kind of vulnerability, and it's a very basic. And I know this is most of these, maybe all of them, are not exclusive to Judaism. I want to just say that, very clearly. But this is where it shows up initially in Jewish tradition in this story of Abraham and the tent. Let's see, Brian and Alan, are you guys raising your hands to read, or do you have a comment? And then I see.
I have a comment.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I don't have the context, Rabbi, but who are these lords that they're referring to?
Oh, the visitors?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it turns out that at least they seem to be angels. And they end up going eventually, a few verses later on, they apparently are the angels that go down into the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in order to see if there are any righteous people there, after God has already told Abraham that God wants to destroy the cities because they're so wicked. And then Abraham says, well, what if there are a few righteous people? What if there are 50? And God says, okay, I won't destroy the cities if you can find 50 righteous people. And Abraham says, okay, what about 45? Okay, what about 40? All right, I'll save it for 40. And Abraham negotiates God all the way down to 10. And that's the end of their conversation. And the next thing you know, the angels are going into Sodom and Gomorrah, and they come to Lot's house. So,
but he did not perceive of them as being Israelites.
Well, I don't think so, because at that point there just weren't. I don't think there were Israelites outside of Abraham and Sarah's orbit. Like they were
So a strict reading of that, it does not say that Abraham ate that food. He said
Correct.
He was a good host, and he watched them eat that food.
Correct.
So that's the food he had available, which implies that we are allowed to prepare unkosher meals for people that don't keep kosher.
Well, that is very.
That we get to eat unkosher meals.
I love that. We're going to circle back to that, Brian, because that whole question is going to come up more so when we get to the rabbinic session the next time. But that's great. That's a great inference. These angels, by the way, also predict that Abraham and Sarah are going to have a child. I didn't include that part because it's not directly related to the food dimension. But this is where they tell Abraham and Sarah, oh, we're going to come back in a year and you're going to have a new baby. And Abraham and Sarah both scoff at that prophecy. They're like, ha, because, Abraham is, I think, one of them is 90 and one of them is, maybe Abraham might be 99, Sarah's 90. I don't know. They're very old, and neither one of them thinks that they're going to have a child. But these angels said it was going to happen, and then and then, as we know in the story, it does happen the way the angels said it was going to. So, great. Alan Binstock?
No, I just raised my hand to read.
Oh, great. Okay, so we're gonna move into the next book, into Exodus, and this text is a bit longer, but this has, I think, yet another dimension of sacred eating that is described in it. So, Alan, if you don't mind, that's a lot of reading. I'm sorry?
We do that, I had a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Maxine.
So the idea of washing someone's feet, did we initiate that, or did that come from the Greeks or some other tradition?
Well, it's here, right, in this text. I think it's a broadly in the ancient Near East and probably in the Mediterranean basin more generally. This was something that was seen as a gesture of kindness, because what were people wearing on their feet?
Yeah, sandals.
Sandals, and they were wandering through the wilderness, and so their feet, who knows what their feet were encountering as they were walking, in the wilderness. And so it was one of life's great pleasures to have one's feet washed. And it wasn't something that happened all that often. And so this was a very, it was a very important part of showing welcome to people.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was something that came from another tradition, prior.
Yeah, I think it is kind of I don't think it's exclusive at all to the Israelite tradition. I'm sure some of you know that got incorporated both into later Jewish practice and into Christian practice. I'm not as clear about where it shows up. I know there's a foot washing that happens in Catholicism, and I don't remember exactly. I don't know if it's around Easter. I feel like it's connected. Is it Easter?
It's Easter. They wash the poor people's feet. The Pope washes poor people's feet.
Okay, so I'm imagining that's an emulation of what Jesus did, and in Jewish practice, the Kohanim in the synagogue, the people who are descended from the priests, get their feet washed by the people who are descended from the Levites. In a traditional Orthodox synagogue, when you get to a certain point in the service where they give the priestly blessing with the Spock hand. So
and in Islam, isn't feet washing done? Don't people wash their feet before?
I am sure they do. I am sure they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it's very common. Especially maybe for the Hajj, I suspect, like when people are making pilgrimage.
Well, I just want everybody to know, if I come to your house, feel free to wash my feet.
That's great.
That is a great kindness.
Thank you, Maxine. All right. So, this next text actually, I believe, is from this week's Torah portion. And it's Exodus 12, selections from Exodus 12. And this text, fascinatingly, comes in the midst. Well, this is a description of how the Israelites are supposed to prepare for the last night in Egypt. And then it also goes on to talk about how in the future, this is before the Exodus has even taken place, God through Moses is telling the Israelites, and by the way, after you get out of here, you are going to pass, here's how you're going to keep this memory alive with your descendants. And it describes what to do. So, Alan, take it away.
Speak to the community leadership of Israel and say that on the 10th of this month, each of them shall take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep watch over it until the 14th day of this month, and all the assembled congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they are to eat. They shall eat the flesh that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in any way with water, but roast it, head, legs, and entrails over the fire. You shall not leave any of it over until morning. If any of it is left until morning, you shall burn it. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is a Passover offering to the Lord, and the blood on the houses where you are staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, so that no plague will destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be to you one of remembrance. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord throughout the ages. You shall celebrate it as an institution for all time. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the very first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. You shall celebrate a sacred occasion on the first day and a sacred occasion on the seventh day. No work at all shall be done on them. Only what every person is to eat, that alone shall be prepared for you.
Be prepared.
In the first month, from the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. No leaven shall be found in your houses for 7 days, for whoever eats what is leavened, that person, whether a stranger or a citizen of the country, shall be cut off from the community of Israel.
Thanks very much, Alan. Okay, so here we have what is probably the first exclusively Israelite commandment dealing with food. And of course, it happens to be connected with, maybe one of the most famous, most well-known food rituals in our tradition. So I don't know, let me just ask this question. I mean, I don't know if this may be, for some people, the first time reading this kind of source text for what the Passover, like the core elements of the Passover celebration are, or if you have seen this text before, did anything stand out to you in a different way this time? All right, Kevin, and then Sue.
What stands out for me is that even before they left Egypt, they're commanded to eat unleavened bread on the first day.
Right. You think it's like, oh, the story we always hear is the bread was unleavened because they had to leave so quickly it didn't have time to rise. But already at this moment, it's not accidental. It is a part of the commandment of how they should eat that last meal. Sue?
Well, I would hate to have this as a Passover recipe where you roast your meat with head, legs, and entrails over a fire. I'm sure that's interesting, but somebody who takes it literally, would they do that? I've never heard of this, combining all your stuff, but it's said in that passage.
Right. So I think that particular combination is related to the fact that it's understood as a traditional sacrifice.
Okay.
This is not just a meal. This is actually each family is making a special sacrifice to God.
To eat it that way.
Sorry?
That's the sacrifice is the eating of that mess that would make.
Right. So, we have this. So food takes on a new role I think, in this story, different from anything we've seen up until now, as a symbol of historical experience that we want to be connecting with ourselves and passing on to the next generation. So eating food that has symbolic, so obviously Passover has a very powerful, is a very powerful expression of this approach. But I also think we could maybe extrapolate from this and say that one dimension of sacred eating could be eating food that has symbolic resonance for us over and above whether we happen to like the taste, whether we happen to be sitting with people and eating that we care about, but that symbolic food, that could be a part of, one dimension of sacredness. Yeah, Maxine?
So somewhere along the line, I had heard that we are not allowed, we should not be eating lamb on Passover. Yet
Correct.
here he's instructing, God's instructing to eat lamb.
Right. So first of all, I'm pretty sure that is specific to Ashkenazic Jews. I believe that Sephardic Jews happily roast lamb on Passover, and this is yet another way that the Sephardic tradition, in my mind, has advantages over the Ashkenazic. But yes, that is a tradition among Ashkenazic Jews, because if you eat lamb on Passover, people might think like that was associated with the sacrifice in the temple. And now that the temple is not around anymore, we need to change our behavior lest we, stop missing the temple, or lest we forget that the temple was destroyed. And so for Ashkenazim, you don't eat lamb on Passover. But Sephardic Jews all over Israel and other parts of the Middle East have been eating lamb going all the way back, as far as I know. Thanks for that question. Lila?
So I hadn't realized that you could be excommunicated if a morsel of leavened bread, you would be forever severed from the nation of, of Israel. That seems a little harsh to me.
So go ahead.
And the other thing is just about how I sort of did a study where I tracked through all the different places where the Passover ritual is mentioned, and it's mentioned a bunch of different times in the Torah, and it changes a little bit or a lot each time, which is interesting. So,
yeah, well, maybe I did not check every single reference, so it would be interesting to do a little comparison of different descriptions of the Passover ritual. I was going to say, in terms of the morsel being how easily it is to be cut off, excommunicated, it gives new understanding for why people are so crazy about cleaning their houses before Passover, in a traditional community especially. But that got passed down to people even who weren't traditional, who were like absolutely, I don't know what, crazy about making sure that they have, checked and double checked and triple checked every nook and cranny in the house because they didn't want any leaven. So this is a pretty strong statement. And, it raises a question in my mind, why the leaven gets such a big focus as the primary thing that determines. So You also might notice that there's a commandment to eat matzah for 7 days here. The tradition did not understand it that way. The rabbis say you only have to eat matzah at the seders, and after that you don't have to eat matzah. Now you still have to eat. You can't eat leaven for the rest of the holiday, but you do not have to eat matzah in contradiction to this very clear statement in the Torah. But the power of food as symbol, I think, is what we get from this example. Okay, we're doing well. I think we're doing well. Let's keep going. The next Exodus text from chapter 23. This is from Mishpatim. It's a mostly legal Torah portion, and this is one of the laws in Mishpatim. And and this also is kind of interesting, having just looked at the Passover laws. So anyone who hasn't read, be willing to read? Maxine, thank you.
3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the sovereign Lord. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with anything leavened, and the fat of my festal offering shall not be left lying until morning. The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
Okay. So this is the first occasion of 3 where that law is stated. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And it's very specific, species-wise, right? This isn't beef. This isn't even, I don't think even this is lamb, right? I mean, I think this is a goat.
Yes.
I think that is what the specific, language refers to. So 3 times a year, these are the 3 festivals: Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. And there are sacrifices that are brought on each of those holidays. And some of the, there's this resonance with you're not allowed to let the meat of the sacrifice, last until the next day. You have to eat it, or it doesn't say this explicitly, but I think the implication is you have to eat it or burn it, just like in the earlier Exodus text. And it's in that context that we get the first, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. So it's in this context, it's a pretty narrow law. You should not boil a kid in its mother's milk. It doesn't say you can't boil a kid in the milk of another animal that wasn't its mother. It doesn't say you can't boil a kid in the milk of a different species of animal. It's that very particular relationship of a young goat and the mother goat, and that you're not allowed to cause that kind of destruction for the young goat using the substance that would have nurtured it as part of its death. So, okay, that's there because that's the first time it shows up. It also shows up in Exodus 34, which is not here, but I'll just tell you that's the second time that the law comes. And now we get to the Leviticus chapter 11, and this is the first time where all the different animals, and this is a new dimension of sacred eating in Jewish tradition. Up until now, there hasn't been any mention of animals that are off limits. So this is the first time we're going to get this. Let me just ask, Brian Friedman, I thought I saw your hand up a few minutes back. I just want to double check and make sure that you didn't have a question or a comment you wanted to share.
Now I was going to go on a tangent, but to save everybody the time, it's not that interesting.
Well,
But
listen.
thank you.
Okay, if you want to put it in the chat, feel free to do that, and we'll see. We'll see if, in fact, people don't want to go on that tangent. So, okay. So, Leviticus, this is pretty long, too. We're going to get the categories of animals, permitted and forbidden, someone who's got some strength in their voice, who's willing to take on this longer text. Oh, Sue? Great. Okay.
All right. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hooves, with clefts through the hooves, and that chews the cud, such you may eat. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hoofs, you shall not eat. The camel, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs. It is impure for you. The daman, all those that choose the cud, it has no true hooves. The hare, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs. It is impure for you. And the swine, although it has true hoofs, with the hooves cleft through, it does not chew the cud. It is impure for you. You shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses. They are impure for you. These you may eat of all that live in water, anything in water, whether in the seas or in the streams, that has fins and scales. These you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fin and scales, among all the swarming things of the water, and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. And an abomination for you they shall remain. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall abominate their carcasses. Everything in the water that has no fins and scales shall be an abomination for you. The following you should abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture, the kite, falcons of every variety, all varieties of raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of every variety, the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged swarming things that walk on all fours shall be an abomination for you. But those that you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walk on all fours, all that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with the ground, of these you may eat the following: locusts of every variety, all varieties of boiled locust, crickets of every variety, and all varieties of grasshopper. But all other winged swarming things that have four legs shall be an abomination for you.
Thank you very much, Sue. That was a mouthful. No pun intended. Okay. So, and again, I imagine this text is familiar to many people here this evening, but anything, if you're kind of reading this closely for the first time, are you struck by anything? Are you surprised by anything? And if you know, and if you're more familiar with it, and also maybe you're seeing something now that you haven't seen before. All right, Lila, and then Kevin.
Is this the first time when the food is not just when it's actually described as being gross, like, an abomination, the wriggly things? Like before there were rules, but this is like,
Yes, I believe, I can't swear that this language hasn't been used before, but not about food. It's never been used about food, the abomination language. It's very strong language. And this is the first time that's being connected with different kinds of animals. Kevin?
Well, two things. One, it hasn't talked about chickens or poultry or ducks or geese, but things that walk on fours, but they're all insects. They have 6 legs. So I'm confused about that.
Yeah, we need, what is the scientist who studies insects called?
Homologous.
Entomologist, right? Right. So yeah, I cannot, I don't know. That's a good point. And the fact that that whole paragraph starts saying that all swarming things that are in this category are an abomination, and then proceeds to list all these exceptions. So let's talk about birds, and I know we have some bird people here tonight. What do you, and I know the bat, it's like one of these things doesn't belong here. The bat doesn't belong. It's not a bird, but it does fly. So the Torah put it in this category. But do you see any through line in this list that are of birds that are not allowed to be eaten?
So I was thinking about that. I thought a lot of them are, what's the word? Carrions.
Yeah.
So none of the carrions, which kind of makes sense. If you're like not sure what's healthy, something that eats dead stuff, probably not. And then a lot of them seem very, frankly, gross and greasy. Like some of them smell bad. Bustards are very weird animals. Owls are spectacularly cute. I don't know if that has something to do with it. I was trying to think if there's like a connection, like would all of these animals even live in the same place? Like the pelicans. Um, I I don't know if they would all be in the same area or not. That area is very much a migratory space, so like it's possible.
Right.
But yeah, I loved the mention of so many birds.
Great. Thank you for that. And Alan, go ahead.
Well, the birds that are listed seem to be birds that eat other animals. They are carnivores. They either eat fish or other small animals.
True.
Right. Right. That is like the one of the main traditional interpretations of this list. And it's interesting, as I think Kevin pointed out, there's no positive list with the birds. It just says these birds are off limits, implying that birds that aren't on this list are all okay. But, we know, like, I don't think,
Ducks
I don't
eat
think,
fish.
sorry,
Ducks eat fish.
ducks
It's
eat
like on the list.
fish. Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Cormorants are on the list, but other mallards or whatever are not on the list.
okay, so ducks are a problem with that theory. Okay.
Geese. Yeah.
And there are other birds that are, vegetarian, if you will. I think, I don't know, like a
Well,
sparrow. I
chickens
don't
eat a
know.
lot of bugs. Yeah,
They eat
sparrows
bugs.
will eat
Okay, all right.
anything.
So they're not. It's not just
Yeah,
they don't
so
survive
chickens
on
eat
seeds
bugs.
alone.
Oh no.
Sorry?
No, and they'll eat eggs of other animals too, a lot of them, or
Okay.
baby birds.
Okay. Okay.
Pheasants aren't on the list, and pheasants, I think, mainly eat seeds.
Pheasant, I
Pheasant,
think,
yes.
is potentially a kosher bird. If it's,
Okay.
so
Okay.
and we'll get to, okay, yeah. So right. So the bird category, I think you guys are basically pointing to this. The bird category is very different from the land animals and the sea animals, and I guess the insects as well, in that there are physical characteristics that define what is okay to eat and what is not okay to eat. But with birds, it's much more open-ended, Kevin?
The hoopoe, from my limited time in Israel, it's sort of like a form of a robin. I can't imagine the hoopoe doing anything other than maybe birds, bugs, and seeds. I'm really surprised to see the hoopoe on the list.
Aren't they
The
nice?
dookie fought.
Yeah.
So oh gosh, they're so cool looking. I haven't actually read any of these things before, like in this detail. And so I just had a moment of clarity from I already texted it to Fitz, so sorry, you have to hear it again. It reminds me of the holy hand grenade. Thou must not count past 3, and thou must only say 2 if it is preceded by 3. You cannot go to 4. As someone on this list has to know. Monty Python, the Holy
Monty
Grail, and
Python and the Holy
Oh,
Grail.
yeah.
the counting
Yes.
of the holy hand grenade. And when
Yes.
I'm listening to Sue talk about these hooves and there too and other things, I just kept hearing Monty Python and the holy hand grenade in my head.
Well, I mean, they were making fun of, right?
I guess it's this
Biblical
it's gotta be this
language,
passage.
yeah. It's so yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I
Alan,
know
do
that's
you
not a
oh,
profound thought, so I apologize.
no,
but I
no,
had to
no,
get it out.
no. It's I think
Great.
that's on point.
Great.
That's on point. Thank you, Julia. Alan, did you have something else?
I just was interested in the use of the word abomination
Yeah.
and what we think it means here. So it doesn't seem like, it means that these things are hateful. It seems more like, there's a restriction, and and so you should treat them like they're an abomination in terms of your actions toward them, and in terms of eating habits, because they're God's creatures. So I don't think they're meant to be seen as hateful.
So, okay, good.
Yeah, but
So,
Steve,
yeah.
you know that some of those birds, the vultures, the kite falcons, can be trained to catch food, right? They
Huh.
hunt with those birds.
Oh,
A lot of
interesting.
the birds, they say you shall abominate. This is, you have the birds that the eagles will go down, swoop down, and get a bat or something.
So that's interesting. Well, we will circle back to that as well. Yeah, I didn't know that. So we're given all these categories of animals that are okay to eat and not okay to eat. Abomination, I think it really has an implication of disgust. Like you should just treat this. Now again, it's only in the context of eating them. You're not, that's where it's not that you have to feel disgust if you see them flying in the sky or wandering around the land.
Or an
But
American flag.
yeah, right. So what this text does not say at all, and we're talking about like the interpretation later on, but this text doesn't say anything about why these animals are okay and those animals are not okay. It just says you can eat these and don't even think about eating those. And that's interesting. And it's been challenging through the ages, not just in the modern period, but people have wondered why are these animals not okay to eat,
Well, it comes down to your father saying, because I said so.
Because I said so. So one theory, and it circles back to the first text from Genesis that we read, which was the text that said all animal life, at least maybe excepting the fish, we don't know, that's a question mark, but all other animal life is going to be vegan, including humanity. And then after the flood, people are given permission to eat animals minus the blood. And then this is the next restriction that comes along specifically for the Israelites. So the suggestion is that the laws of kashrut at their base are a compromise between veganism and eating meat. And because it's a restriction, you can't just go out and eat any kind of meat you want to. Only these animals are okay. So it sends a message that there is a problem with, this is the theory, there's a problem with eating meat. I.e., anyone who's a vegetarian or a vegan on this call, you have to kill an animal. And there's a fundamental problem with that. So, and as we're going to see, that's not the only restriction. This is the first, well, it's the second if you take the blood into account. But then it narrows down to the categories, and it's going to get narrower as we go through. So let's see. All right. Now, let me just ask you guys. I saw two different end times for this, and I will respect, if you signed up expecting us to end at 9, we can do that. And if you are expecting us to go to 9:15, we can do that. Are you game for 9:15? And I promise I'll really be strict about the 9:15 ed time. I know I'm not always so good at that, but I'm really gonna be careful about it. Okay. So the next Leviticus text from the same chapter, again, kind of emphasizes this abomination of, eating swarming things. But then it goes on to say, and this is the first time we've seen this language, you shall not make yourselves impure by eating these animals, and thus become impure. For I am the Lord your God. You shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not make yourselves impure through any swarming thing that moves upon the earth. So, here is a general, very opaque, no question about it, but a general attempt at a justification. That something about these animals that are not allowed to be eaten are they interfere with holiness in some way, or with human beings, connecting with holiness. And so that is the underlying justification from a biblical perspective. Again, why that works, how that works, it doesn't say. It just says God is holy, we're supposed to be holy, and if we eat these animals, we will not be holy. We will become impure, and we will mess up our holiness. Similarly, 9 chapters later in Leviticus 20 makes a general statement, you shall observe all my laws and my regulations, lest the land to which I bring you to settle and spew you out. If you don't follow the laws, again, it doesn't say why the laws are the way they are, but you can get kicked out of the land by not following laws, including the laws about what food is okay to eat. You shall not follow the practices of the nation that I am driving out before you, for it is because what they did all these things that I abhorred them and said to you, you shall possess their land, for I will give it to you to possess a land flowing with milk and honey. So this is kind of an additional dimension from the Torah's perspective, like the non-Israelite groups maybe made a point of eating these other animals, and so it's something. But again, there seems to be something more essential going on here. Not just that it's a way of distinguishing between Israelites and non-Israelites.
When you were reading, did you say the land will spew you out?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's like the earth itself.
Yes. And
Like you.
actually, spew is a very nice, it's kind of a genteel word in this. In the Hebrew, it's very earthy. It's literally vomit. The earth will vomit you out if you don't. So that's interesting too. That's for another time, but the idea that the gift of the land was conditional on following all the laws. And this isn't the only place in the Torah where it says, if you don't follow the laws, you will get kicked out. And specifically, the land itself will vomit you out. The land will not be able to put up with the behavior that is bringing impurity to the land, and it will vomit you out, just as if you're a virus that needs to be gotten rid of. So, or something like that.
Steve, it also says earlier, it says, you shall abominate among the birds. Not that they are an abomination, but it says you shall abominate, which is a very strong word, among the birds. Versus it refers to other things as they are an abomination, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Right, now it does say that too. I know it leads with you shall abominate, and then there's a phrase that comes after that says they are an abomination. I understand that that's a problem from, in terms of what Alan was saying. Like, no, they're part of creation, so how can they be an abomination? But that is what it says in this text of Leviticus.
Okay.
But no, you're right. It's a very strong. And again, the next paragraph in that Leviticus 20, you shall set apart the pure beast from the impure bird from the pure. Mm-hmm. You shall not draw abomination upon yourselves through beast or bird or anything with which the ground is alive. For I have set apart for you to treat as impure. Again, this is only for the Israelites. Any other human beings are totally allowed to eat whatever food they want, whatever animals they want, as long as they get rid of the blood. That's the only universal. Okay. Okay. Deuteronomy 14. I'm gonna read here, guys, just so we can, it'll be.
Get going.
Okay. 14:21. You shall not eat anything that has died a natural death. Give it to the stranger. Sue, go ahead. What are you thinking?
I'm just, you can't eat it, but it's okay to give it to your neighbor or stranger.
Right. Right. And it's natural death. I don't know if roadkill fits into this category, or I'm sorry to be that. I apologize for that. But so other people can eat it. This is an Israelite law.
Okay.
And again, at the end, for the third time, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. This is the third time it's stated in the Torah.
Yeah.
And this law that says you can't eat anything that dies a natural death or dies on its own, that gets, we'll see that gets translated into eventually that there's a proper way to slaughter an animal. Okay. And the only animal, so this is a further narrowing of what you can eat in the animal world. First, there's no blood. Second, there are categories of animals that are absolutely off limits. And even for an animal that is, that is okay, it has to die in a particular way. It has to be killed in a particular way for it to be edible for an Israelite. So it's a further narrowing, further compromising, making eating meat much more difficult for Israelites than it would have been for,
class.
Other groups. Okay. Let's see. Okay. The next one. Deuteronomy 8. Selections from Deuteronomy 8. This is Moses speaking on God's behalf to the Israelites. as Moses is getting ready, he knows he's not going to take them into the land. He's giving them instructions. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God, walk in God's ways, show reverence. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley and vines and figs and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. Does that ring a bell for people here? Anybody?
This is the land of milk and honey.
Well, it is the land of milk and honey, and it even says that, I think, somewhere in here.
It does.
But those particular things, wheat and barley, vines, by the way, are grapes.
Grapes, yes.
Figs and pomegranates, olives, and by the way, honey is understood as dates, as date honey, not as bee honey. And so these are the 7 species that are associated with the land of Israel, and they appear right here in this text. But here comes the big message. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to the Lord your God for the good land given to you. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep the divine commandments, rules, and laws which I enjoin upon you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware, lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, and you say to yourselves, my own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth and fulfillment of the covenant made on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. Okay, so.
Not by might, not by power, but by spirit alone. Do all
right.
men live in peace.
Right, and it is not in our control, right? Everything that we have in our lives, all the blessings that we have, food and otherwise, in one way or another, it is an act. I'm going to use a term that is not commonly used in Judaism, but it does exist. It's associated, I think, for many people with Christianity. It is grace that we have these things in our lives. Mm-hmm. It is in one way or another. Mm-hmm. Not that we have nothing to do with it, but we couldn't have what we have if there weren't gifts that we were given of one kind or another. Whether it's a gift of, the family that we were born into, or a gift of the kind of mind or intelligence we have, or the kind of physical capacities that we have that we did, those capacities we didn't earn. They were at least potentially part of what we came into the world with. Or the help that we get from other people in terms of pointing us in the right direction or helping us clarify when we're confused, whatever it is. I think this is a big concept in Jewish tradition, and specifically around food. The idea, I think I missed something here. Hold on. Oh. No. Where is it? I missed a phrase. No. Huh. I wonder if I accidentally left it out. So in this same text from Deuteronomy 8, there is a line that says, I'm sorry. It's here. It's the first line of the second paragraph. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to the Lord your God for the good land given to you. In Hebrew, ve'achalta, ve'savata, uve'rachta. You eat and you are satisfied, and you should bless. So this is the source text for the whole idea of saying blessings over food before we eat and after we eat. And this is another, I think, this is as important, if not more so, than all the kashrut laws in terms of the sacredness of the eating experience. Because in theory, saying a blessing before we eat something could raise our awareness to a level of that sense of grace. Like, there was a lot of energy that we had nothing to do with that has allowed this food to be sitting in front of us. Where were we having this conversation recently? This was, someone remind me. Was it at Shabbat? I don't know. We were having this conversation somewhere. Anyway, if you remember, let me know. But, so the sense of blessing as a way of acknowledging. And
Was
again,
it the new members brunch?
yes. Thank you, Catherine. That's exact right. It was the new members brunch. Some people were talking about this. So that and someone shared in that context this practice they have. Maybe this was you, Sue. I don't remember of thinking about, or maybe it was Maxine, thinking about all the different inputs that went into making this food on my plate possible. From the people who, harvested and, cultivated and transported and, did whatever was needed to be done to make it into, its most edible form, to the fact that it, the ground that it grew in had enough nutrients and all of the natural, the worms in the ground and the insects that, brought, that made sure that that were pollinated and all of those things. Obviously, we can't think of everything, but even to think of one or two of those elements, that it changes one's experience of eating, and as opposed to thinking, because it's it's one of the most mundane things that we do, and it's this amazing thing that we do every day, and we don't experience it that way for the most part. And for some people, the kashrut laws help feel that way more frequently. And for some people, this tradition of blessing can be helpful in that way. But I think not taking the food for granted, that is the big underlying idea here in the biblical set of laws. Kevin?
He got frozen.
Uh-oh. Kevin, are you frozen? Oi.
In the meantime, that sounds like an Audrey thing she talked about.
Yeah, you're right. It was Audrey. You're absolutely right. Audrey's very big on imagining all the different, or thinking about all the different ways that contributions. Okay, Kevin, go ahead. No.
Can you hear me?
Kevin, your picture is frozen and your voice is
there. That may be you.
Okay, this might be better. Try again.
The passage you read was giving thanks after the meal. So
Correct.
somewhere along the line, there must be something in text about giving a blessing before the meal.
Perfect segue, Kevin. Okay, we will pick up with that when we meet next on is it the 29th, Thursday evening? The 29th, I think, is our next session. Lila?
Well, I have a question about the text we went through so far. They go through all these texts about meat that's not okay to eat, but then we move to a section about what you'll get in the Promised Land, and it's all vegan.
So milk and honey, right?
Right. Oh, wait, is it milk? Is that one of them?
Well, milk is not in the list of 7, but it is called the land of milk and honey.
Okay.
But
the
right,
7 species are...
the 7 species are not, they're all vegan. You're absolutely right.
So I'm just wondering, like, there's no place where God, maybe gives them a heads up about which plants might be poisonous or um, there's no, but there is this sort of tension, but then between the quasi unclean meat and the vegan and these beautiful foods that, okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good. I never noticed that before, but right, it could have listed a land where animals grow into very wonderful specimens that are waiting to be slaughtered for our special sacrifices and holiday meals. But right, it doesn't say that. So no, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, it is 9:15. Thank you all. We did record this, and Lila, I'm guessing it's gonna tell me what to do to get the recording over to you, probably, right?
Wait, you did record it on the cloud.
On the cloud, yeah.
Okay, so you don't have to do anything
I don't have
else.
to do anything.
I go to Zoom, I get it, I downloaded it.
Fantastic.
I put it on
Okay.
our YouTube channel. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it. And we will continue with the rabbis on a week from Thursday. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Night.
Thanks a lot. See
Lila
you soon.
Tov.
Bye. Lila Tov. Bye.